Welcome to Wisdom Planet. Wisdom worth spreading. Happy listening. The book I am interpreting for you today is called Thinking, Fast and Slow. The author of this book, Daniel Kahneman, is the recipient of the 2002 Nobel Prize in Economics. He pioneered a new branch of economics called behavioral economics. Thinking, Fast and Slow is a classic work in behavioral economics. What is behavioral economics? We will talk about it later. First, let me tell you something more legendary about Daniel Kahneman. He is not an economist, but a psychologist. You might find it strange why a psychologist can win the Nobel Prize in economics. That's what makes him remarkable. He was the first to combine psychological theories, psychological experiments, and economic research, solving a major problem in traditional economics. The traditional edifice of economics has a faulty foundation. At that time, economic research was based on a fundamental premise called the rational person assumption, which assumes that individuals, in their economic activities, will make rational choices in order to maximize their own interests. All economic deductions were built upon this rational person assumption. However, economists discovered that in the real world, people's actual behavior does not align with this assumption. In the book, there is an example of an economist inviting his friend to play a coin toss game. If the friend wins, he can get 200 yuan, but if he loses, he will lose 100 yuan. If we analyze it based on the rational person assumption, the probability of winning and losing is the same, losing less money and winning more money, so it is worth participating. However, the economist's friend refuses, because he believes that the satisfaction of gaining 200 yuan cannot offset the pain of losing 100 yuan. You see, in reality, our considerations and decision-making process are not entirely driven by the pursuit of maximizing profits, as economists imagine. The process of human decision-making is much more complex than economists think. The previous examples illustrate that, many times, people's fear of risk outweighs the potential gains in their minds. The rational person assumption of traditional economics is flawed, and using it to deduce human behavior and decision-making can lead to significant discrepancies. As a result, Kahneman pioneered a new branch of economics called behavioral economics, which combines psychological theories with economic analysis to study how factors, such as behavior, emotions, and psychology, which traditional economics pays insufficient attention to, influence individual and collective economic decision-making, and subsequently affect the functioning of economic organizations and systems. This book, Thinking, Fast and Slow, is Kahneman's masterpiece. In this book, Kahneman presents to us how humans think when making judgments and decisions based on his years of research. What are the flaws in this innate thinking process? And how can we compensate for these flaws? The significance of this book lies in its introduction of the concept of cognitive biases. It reminds us of how prone the human brain is to making errors and the common patterns behind these errors. This knowledge is particularly important for people in the 21st century, because it is the first time in human history that so many people are engaged in work related to numbers and rational decision-making. You can consider this book as a manual for the mind, and a guide to improving thinking accuracy. Next, I will interpret this book for you in two parts. In the first part, let's take a look at how we make judgments and decisions. In the second part, let's explore methods that can enhance the accuracy of our thinking. Part 1. Let's first talk about how we make judgments and decisions. The answer is actually hidden in the title of this book, Thinking, Fast and Slow. Kahneman divides human thinking into two systems, System 1 and System 2, which we can also refer to as the fast system and the slow system. Imagine this scenario. Suppose a car is coming towards you head-on. What is your first reaction? Do you unconsciously move aside? Now let me ask you another question. Can you mentally calculate 17 multiplied by 24? Can you give me an immediate answer? This is the functioning of two different systems, the fast system and the slow system. When you unconsciously decide to move aside, we activate the fast system. However, when you are calculating 17 multiplied by 24, you need to engage the slow system. Each system has its own strengths. The fast system excels at reading facial expressions, interpreting tone of voice, judging distances, and identifying dangers in the surroundings. On the other hand, the slow system is skilled at solving mathematical and logical problems, choosing appropriate wording, and comparing the performance of two mobile phones. In simple terms, the fast system tends to rely on intuitive judgments, while the slow system leans towards rational judgments. In reality, everyone's thinking process is actually a result of the collaboration between the fast and slow systems. These two systems have clear division of labor. One characteristic of their cooperation is that the fast system is often in automatic operation mode, while the slow system is in a relaxed state. Only when the fast system encounters a problem it cannot handle, it will seek help from the slow system. For example, in the problem of multiplying 17 by 24 that was just mentioned, the fast system cannot provide an answer, and that's when the slow system will be activated. There is another situation where the slow system can be activated, which is when things do not align with intuition and go against our common sense. For example, it doesn't rain red, and gorillas from the zoo don't suddenly run onto the streets. This is what Kahneman refers to as when intuition encounters trouble, reason steps in to resolve it. For example, when you drive from home to the office, you have taken that route many times. You know which intersection has traffic lights, when to stop, and which intersection requires you to use the turn signal. You don't even have to think much to make immediate judgments. This is the fast system helping you make decisions. However, one day you have to visit a client at another company that you have never been to before. When you reach an unfamiliar intersection, you tend to consciously slow down, double-check the navigation, carefully read the information on the road signs, and then make a judgment. This is when the slow system helps you make decisions. Why does our brain use such a mechanism? Since the slow system is more accurate, why not rely on it to handle all the problems, and instead have an additional fast system that is less accurate? There are two reasons for this, one being a practical reason, and the other being a historical reason left behind by human evolution. The reason is that slow systems occupy too much of our attention. You can think of our brain as a computer, and slow systems are like powerful programs that consume a lot of memory. Once they start running, other programs cannot run. When we engage in slow system thinking, we tend to ignore other information around us. The book gives an example of an experiment conducted by psychologists. They filmed a short video in which two teams of athletes, one wearing white jerseys and the other wearing black jerseys, were passing a ball. The psychologists gathered a group of spectators and asked them to count the number of passes made by the white team, completely ignoring the passes made by the black team. This task required complete focus, and in other words, it required the use of the slow system. Psychologists had a design in the short film where, in addition to athletes wearing white and black jerseys, they also arranged for someone to disguise themselves as a gorilla. This gorilla walked through the crowd and even pounded its chest in front of the camera, appearing for 9 seconds. Surprisingly, although everyone watched the short film attentively, half of the viewers completely failed to notice the gorilla among the crowd. You see, when the slow system starts working, it takes up a lot of attention. If we give all the work to the slow system, it is difficult to have extra attention to take care of other things. The author used a metaphor in the book. The slow system is like a high-power electrical appliance. If it is kept on, overloading the electricity will cause a circuit breaker trip. The division of labor between the fast system and the slow system has a historical reason rooted in evolution. From the perspective of human evolution, many of our seemingly irrational thoughts today are actually the reasons why our ancestors survived. They face the challenges of nature, and while walking, a tiger may suddenly appear in front of them. They must make a quick decision, either fight it or run away. If you suggest stopping to think carefully, assess the risks, calculate the probabilities, and then make a decision, they would become the tiger's meal. Therefore, for our ancestors, relying on the fast system, which is making decisions based on intuition, although not precise, it increased our chances of survival. In such a dangerous environment, precision had to give way to speed. If we look at it from an evolutionary perspective, we can understand some of the irrational behaviors of humans today. For example, excessive self-confidence. Psychologists have conducted a survey in which they gathered a group of drivers and asked them, "How do you rate your driving skills?" If we divide it into two categories, do you consider yourself in the higher skilled category or the lower skilled category? Can you guess the result? 80% of the drivers believed that their skills were above average. This type of research began with a survey of 1 million high school students in the United States in 1976. The study found that 70% of students believed their leadership abilities were above average, 60% believed their athletic abilities were above average, and 85% believed their interpersonal skills were above average. Among these individuals, 25% believed they were among the top 1% in terms of excellence. A similar survey conducted by the University of Washington among college students also found comparable results, with 89% of students believing they were more positive than most people. Most people tend to believe they are more fair, wealthy, and have better character than others. Why do we have such irrational thoughts? Because from an evolutionary perspective, excessive self-confidence may not be harmful, and in many cases, it can even be beneficial to us. Assuming we are primitive humans walking in the forest. At this moment, we see a deer running past us, very fast. I am a more rational person and calculated that the probability of me catching up to this deer is 1%, very low. However, you are completely different from me. You are an overly confident person and believe that you have a 50% chance of catching it. You immediately start chasing after it. However, you should note that our mental state can affect our physical body. Even if we have similar abilities, if you believe that you can catch the deer, you may produce more dopamine and therefore, you will put in more effort to chase after the deer. As a result, the probability of you catching the deer may increase. If you catch the deer, you will have meat to eat, while I may starve. You see, excessive confidence increases your chances of survival. After thousands of years of natural selection, our ancestors, who were the ones who ran out to chase deer in the beginning, survived and passed on this trait in our genes. Because of the characteristics of our brain and the environment in which our ancestors lived, humans cannot rely solely on the slow system for all thinking. Instead, we usually keep the slow system in standby mode and first assign tasks to the fast system. If the fast system encounters difficulties, then we hand over the problem to the slow system to solve. In general, there is no problem with the division of labor in our brain. It helps us efficiently process various things. When we activate the slow system and think rationally, we need to mobilize more brain resources, so we use it less often, which saves us energy. However, this division of labor also has a potential problem that we may not even be aware of, which is that the fast system operates too quickly and often gives an answer before the slow system has a chance to respond. Just like a joke, a job applicant went for an interview at a company. The interviewer asked, "Do you have any special skills?" The applicant replied, "I'm really fast at mental calculations." The interviewer then asked, "Okay, what is 37 multiplied by 25? Without hesitation, the applicant blurted out, "It's 900. The interviewer pressed some buttons on a calculator and said, "You got it wrong." The applicant replied, "Never mind if it's right or wrong, just tell me if I'm fast or not. Even well-educated individuals can easily make mistakes due to fast thinking. In a book, there is a test question: a racket and a ball together cost 1.1 yuan. The racket is 1 yuan more expensive than the ball. So, how much is the ball worth? You might instinctively say that the ball is worth 0.1 yuan. However, if you slow down and calculate, you will realize that the racket should be worth 1.05 yuan and the ball should be worth 0.05 yuan. It's okay if you answered incorrectly. Even high-achieving students from Harvard University, Massachusetts Institute of Technology, and Princeton University gave incorrect answers in over 50% of cases. When encountering a problem, the fast system quickly provides an answer without going through the slow system's careful consideration, resulting in errors. This process is what we call irrational thinking. Kahneman summarized 9 common types of irrational thinking. I have made a list of these 9 errors and placed it in the description below the video. You can use it as a self-checklist and regularly compare it to see if you make these errors in your everyday thinking. Let's summarize the thinking mechanisms of human judgment and decision-making. Kahneman divided human thinking patterns into 2 systems, the fast system and the slow system. The fast system tends to rely on intuitive judgments, while the slow system tends to rely on rational thinking. In reality, the thinking process of each individual is actually the result of the collaboration between the fast and slow systems. Because slow systems require a lot of attention, and early humans had a higher demand for speed in their survival environment, we evolved a special thinking mechanism. Normally, the slow system remains idle while the fast system handles the work. If the fast system encounters difficulties, then the problems are passed on to the slow system for resolution. However, if the fast system runs too quickly and provides an answer before the slow system has a chance to carefully consider it, the answer may be incorrect. This process is what we call irrational thinking. Kahneman reminds us in his book that when we examine ourselves, we often find it easier to see our slow system. We may think that we have clear minds, logical thinking, good decision-making skills, and know what we want and what we should do. In reality, most of the time, it is our fast system that dominates our brains. By realizing this, you are actually more awake than others. Part 2. After listening to the content just now, you may feel a bit discouraged. The functioning of our brain and our evolution determine that we are prone to irrational thinking when we contemplate. But does that mean we can only accept this reality? Not at all. In this book, Kahneman shares many methods that can help us think. Next, let's take a look at what methods can improve the accuracy of our thinking. Researchers conducted an experiment where they asked college students to take a cognitive response test. The questions on the questionnaire were similar to this. If 5 machines can produce 5 small parts in 5 minutes, how long would it take for 100 machines to produce 100 small parts? As a result, they found that if the font on the questionnaire is very clear, 90% of students will answer at least one question incorrectly. However, if the font on the questionnaire is in light gray and small, requiring careful observation to read clearly, the percentage of students answering questions incorrectly drops to 35%. Kahneman uses this example to tell us a principle for improving thinking accuracy. As we mentioned earlier, the main reason for irrational thinking is that the fast system quickly gives an incorrect answer without going through the slow system's careful consideration. Therefore, an important way to improve thinking accuracy is to awaken the slow system. So, what are the ways to help awaken the slow system in our brains? Kahneman provides many methods in his book, which can be summarized into 2 directions, using formulas and relying on others. Let's first take a look at how to awaken the slow system using formulas. We often say a good memory is not as good as a bad pen, but we can also say a good brain is not as good as a bad pen. Kahneman reminds us that when faced with a problem, a simple formula calculation can achieve much higher accuracy than subjective judgment. When you hear mathematical calculations, you might furrow your brow. I know, your mind is filled with complex tables, weights, and coefficients. Don't worry, Kahneman has reassured us with his research and given us a peace of mind. Kahneman was once commissioned by the Israeli military to develop a testing system to assess the quality of soldiers. This evaluation system is not complicated, consisting of 6 indicators. Interviewers rate soldiers' performance on each indicator on a scale of 1 to 5, and the scores are added up to determine the soldier's total score. This system does not have complex indicators or different weights, but it is very effective. So, the formula calculations we are talking about don't necessarily have to be so complicated. Simply integrating some fractions together is often better than relying on personal subjective judgments. We can apply this method to work and life, helping ourselves improve the accuracy of judgment. For example, blind dates. Let's say you have 20 profiles in your hands and you want to choose 3 people to meet. Picking based on intuition is not the best approach. You can design a simple evaluation system for yourself. You first select several factors that you consider most important, such as appearance, education, and personality. Then, rate each person based on these 3 factors, and the sum of the ratings will be the total score. You only need to choose the top 3 based on the total score. After discussing the use of formulas, let's take a look at how to awaken the slow system with the help of others. We mentioned earlier that when we examine ourselves, we often find it easier to see our slow system. We may believe that we have a clear mind, logical thinking, good decision-making skills, and know what we want and should do. In reality, most of the time, it is our fast system that dominates our brain. This can be considered a psychological principle of being blind to one's own faults. Even Kahneman himself is not immune to overestimating himself. Many years ago, while serving in the Israeli Defense Forces, Kahneman was preparing to teach a course on judgment and decision-making in high school. He collaborated with others to design the course outline and write the teaching materials. At that time, Kahneman gathered a group of people and formed a textbook writing team. During the writing process, one day, Kahneman had a sudden idea and suggested that they predict how long it would take to complete this textbook. Some said it could be done in a year and a half, while others believed it would take 2.5 years. Most of the estimates fell within this range. Kahneman then asked how long it took others to write similar textbooks. There happened to be someone in the group who had previous experience in writing textbooks, and he said that 40% of the writing teams eventually gave up, and the remaining 60% took at least 7 years, with the longest taking up to 10 years. Based on this statistic, the probability of failure was 40%, and the reasonable prediction for this project would be at least 7 years. However, the members of the team did not understand and thought that writing a textbook was not that difficult, so they couldn't understand why such a simple project would take so long. It is important to know that at that time, they only took 1 year to establish a detailed teaching outline, wrote several chapters of teaching materials, and even conducted several demonstration classes in the classroom. Everything progressed very smoothly. They believed that their team could complete a book in about 2 years. So, what was the result? It took them 8 years to complete the writing of the teaching materials. They knew in advance the possible consequences of something, but chose to ignore it. In the end, because the book took too long to write, the enthusiasm of the Ministry of Education for this project gradually waned, and the book was never put into use. In today's terms, looking at oneself is called internal perspective, while judging based on others' outcomes is called external perspective. Introducing an external perspective can better assist us in making accurate judgments. Speaking of the matter of compiling teaching materials, from an internal perspective, it means using one's own progress at the beginning to predict the progress of the subsequent work. However, things often do not develop in a linear manner at a fixed rate. It is possible to have the most enthusiasm at the beginning, but it is even more likely to encounter extremely serious difficulties later on. In fact, the textbook writing team, led by Kahneman, did encounter various difficulties later on. Some people got divorced, some fell ill, and the work was no longer as smooth as it was at the beginning. These difficulties were both unexpected and understandable. If you haven't experienced them, you wouldn't be able to imagine, but those who have done it have mostly encountered them. It is precisely because of this characteristic that asking oneself how to deal with it is not as effective as asking others how they have dealt with it. An external perspective can help us see crucial information that an internal perspective cannot. In addition, there is also a psychological reason. When facing pressure and trouble, people are very unwilling to question themselves. However, when questioning others, it becomes easier. So when we observe whether others have made mistakes, we are more likely to identify pitfalls. This is the psychological principle behind the idiom, the onlooker sees clearly. Therefore, Kahneman reminds us to harness the power of bystanders. These bystanders will use their slow thinking to help you correct any errors that may arise from your fast thinking. Kahneman provides us with a method called premortem. The name may sound scary, but it is actually a way to help us avoid overconfidence. The process of this move is actually very simple. Before making a major decision, you can invite a group of colleagues who understand this decision to hold a short meeting. The agenda of the meeting is to assume that this decision has been implemented for a year, but has encountered a huge failure. What is the most likely reason for the failure? Each person writes down the possible reasons for the failure of this matter according to their own understanding, and then ranks them according to importance and probability. In this way, we can take precautions, prevent these factors, and improve the success rate of the work. Kahneman also suggests that before making a decision, you can go to a more relaxed environment, such as next to the water cooler in the office, and listen to casual conversations and criticisms from others. Facing others' doubts will certainly feel unpleasant, but it will still be much easier than questioning yourself. Let's summarize what methods can enhance the accuracy of our thinking after we realize our irrational thinking. The core idea is to awaken the slow system in our brain. Kahneman provides us with two directions in his book, using formulas and relying on others. Kahneman reminds us that when faced with a problem, a simple mathematical calculation will yield much higher accuracy than subjective judgment. Because of our own characteristics, we are also prone to overestimate ourselves and find it difficult to accept criticism. Therefore, it is very challenging to conduct a slow system evaluation of ourselves. At this time, we can seek assistance from others and introduce an external perspective to use their slow system to help us examine our decisions. In addition, Kahneman also has a reminder that our own physical condition can also affect the accuracy of our decision-making. Research has found that when your blood sugar levels drop, or in other words, when you are particularly tired, your self-control becomes worse. At this time, you are more likely to make hasty and risky decisions. So when you are especially tired, it is really important to take a break, go for a 5-minute walk, or take a few deep breaths. This can actually improve your level of thinking. Okay, I have finished interpreting this book, Thinking, Fast and Slow, for you. We first answered a question: how do we make judgments and decisions? Our brain has a fast system and a slow system running simultaneously. Normally, the slow system remains idle, but when the fast system encounters difficulties, the slow system comes in to solve the problem. However, if the fast system runs too quickly and immediately provides an answer before the slow system, this answer has not been carefully considered by the slow system, resulting in errors. This process is what we call irrational thinking. After we realize our irrational thinking, what methods can improve the accuracy of our thinking? Kahneman provides us with two directions in his book, using formulas and relying on others. The core idea of these two directions is to awaken the slow system in our brains. After listening to this content, you may develop a stereotype about the fast system, thinking that it is reckless and prone to errors, as if it often ends up being more of a hindrance than a help. In fact, there is not a thin line between the fast system and the slow system. Indeed, the fast system is the reason for many of our mistakes, but it is also the reason for many of our correct decisions. This system has been running for millions of years, protecting our ancestors and enabling them to survive and reproduce in challenging environments. Even today, in critical moments, the fast system acts decisively and often helps people. For example, well-trained soldiers, firefighters, and athletes all know how to utilize their fast system. Moreover, the distinction between the fast system and the slow system is not clear-cut. Research has shown that as you become more proficient in performing a task, the effort required decreases. Studies on the brain also indicate that the patterns of activity associated with actions change as proficiency increases, with certain brain regions no longer being involved. In other words, through deliberate practice, we can transform tasks that originally relied on the slow system into ones that rely on the fast system, turning tasks that require a lot of attention into natural instincts and intuition. This is the significance of learning and practice, as it builds a bridge between the fast system and the slow system. So, the most ideal state is for us to understand the fast system, delve into the slow system, and also master a method of overall coordination, knowing when to trust the fast system, and when to activate the slow system. Being adept and skillful in the balance between fast and slow thinking is what constitutes first-class wisdom. The above is the essence of this book's content. Congratulations on finishing another book. Thank you for your support. Please subscribe to our Wisdom Planet audiobook channel. Like and share it with family and friends. Wisdom worth spreading and opening up a better future. Thank you and see you again.